Welcome to Executive Leaders Radio, your spot in the corner office, the radio show where executives share their secrets to success. Executive Leaders Radio.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, with my co-hosts Jim Wilson, Newmark, Caleb Hoppus, Hanlon, and Matt Clark, Corcentric. Jim, can you please give us a rundown on who we have on the air today, please?
Sure, Herb. We got a great show today. We've got Erik Soiferman, founder and owner, Liberty Urgent Care; Justin Wineburgh, president and CEO, Alkemy X; Brendan Slay, executive director and head coach, Pennsylvania RTC; and Danny Liberatoscioli, president, Walnut Hill College.
Let's get to know our first guest, Erik Soiferman, founder and owner, Liberty Urgent Care. Erik, what is Liberty Urgent Care? What are you guys doing?
Liberty Urgent Care is a walk-in medical clinic. We do non-emergency, non-life-threatening medical care.
Where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
I'm from the Philadelphia suburbs. I have one sister. She's 3 years younger than me.
And 8 to 14, what was the list of stuff you were up to as a kid, 8 to 14 years old?
Mostly sports. I had one really good best friend. We were playing baseball and soccer, and pretty much inseparable.
Mm-hmm. So you're a doc. How young were you when science began to show up in your blood?
Probably around 9 years old. My father was a doctor. I was at his office. There was an emergency either in the waiting room or on the street. I don't quite remember. And he was the calm in the storm and took care of the patient. And I knew that's what I wanted to do.
What do you mean that's what you wanted to do? What are you talking about?
I loved the calm in the storm and being able to take care of an emergency that was everyone else around him was panicking. But he knew what to do. He knew how to fix it. And that's who I wanted to be.
Boy, that makes a lot of sense. That's why you're running Liberty Urgent Care Centers. Caleb?
Hey, Erik, tell us a little bit more about your dad.
So my dad was an attorney and a physician, and was my role model growing up.
So did you ever spend any time with him in his practice?
Yeah, all the time. From the time I was about, I don't remember, 7 or 8 years old, whenever I had free time, I wanted to spend time with Dad, and I would go down to his office and hang out. What
did you see between him and the interactions of people in the community?
It was a South Philly practice, so it was very community-based. The people loved him, he loved the people, and it wasn't much of it was a doctor's office, but it was a family kind of as well.
So what did you learn about these relationships with people and their doctors, their employers, people in the community? That
it's really important to form a bond with the community where you work, become as involved as you can so that there's a respect both professionally and personally. It makes for things to go much smoother.
Jim?
Yeah, Erik, you told us your mother also had a big influence on your life. Can you tell us what she did?
Yeah, Mom was a public relations director for hospital systems and medical practices, attorneys, and she also ran her own business.
What were some of your experiences with her? You mentioned something about hearing her on the radio.
Yeah, so there was a tragedy when I was in 10th or 11th grade, right around our neighborhood, and it was a really trying thing. And I was in high school. I got in the car was running over to her office to see if she had heard about it. And I heard her on news radio being interviewed about it. And it was really cool. It was, there was my mom in the same role there where my dad was, where she was the calm in the storm.
What do you take with your mother to work with you every day?
Well, when I was a kid, she was on call, and it was when pagers first came out, and it was this big, long brick thing. And while I was sitting waiting for the bus, I would be holding her pager because my mom was so cool and my mom was important, and it was cool to hold that pager. So that's a memory that I've kept with me since I'm, 5, 6 years old.
Did you want to be important like mom and dad, like you are with these urgent care centers? When somebody has an emergency, they're really depending on you. Matt, what do you got?
You mentioned you switched from private school to public school at some point in your childhood. What precipitated that move from private school to public school?
So my family moved from one house to another. We moved into the public school system that was really good, and we switched over schools.
How old were you when that happened?
12.
Okay. Tough age to switch schools. Was that a tough transition?
It would have been a tough transition, except I had my best friend that went to the old school with me. He also moved. We were inseparable at the time, and we transitioned together. So it was much easier than it could have been.
And what did you learn about having people kind of close to you help you through kind of tough transitions?
Relationships are amazing. And, now I have people that have worked with me for years, but even more so, I have people that worked with me years ago that are now back working with me again.
Who's got the next question?
Hey, Erik, how young were you when you started making money?
My first job was 16 at a cashier at a supermarket.
Tell us a little bit about some of your tasks, what you were doing in the supermarket.
Oh, it was just ringing things up. It was before barcode, so everything was rung in by hand.
How about any influences there? What were the bosses like?
So there were two that I remember. One was great, to a 16-year-old, understood that I was 16. One was not so great. And it wasn't a great experience, but it taught me a lot of the different kinds of leadership and how I wanted to be when I was a leader. So
you can learn from good managers and bad managers. Tell us a little more about that.
I say it all the time, and I think that learning how you don't want to do something is just as important as as learning how you want to do something.
So let's see a lot of the time you spent growing up. You were in a doctor's office, you were in a grocery store. These are really pillars of the community. Do you think it's important to have local businesses like that?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really pride myself on is the relationship I have with the communities where I put my urgent cares. First thing I do is contact the township and the police departments and the fire departments, and we sponsor all of the sports. It is so important to be involved in that community. It just makes the relationship so much tighter, and trust and being a part of it is really, really important.
Do you get to know the people in each individual community?
Absolutely.
Tell us more about that. What are the relationships like there?
You start with getting to know the people. You start with getting to know the township's administration to the point where they all have my cell phone. They call, they need a favor. They absolutely, no problem. How can I help you? What can I do? And they reciprocate. You really become a part of that. It's not just a business in the community. It's a part of the community.
Mm-hmm. You obviously admire your dad quite a bit and mirror a lot of who he is. How are you different from your dad?
So my mother says that I'm a more refined version of my father, to the point where we unfortunately lost my dad last year. But it's interesting that he always knew somebody wherever we went. He had a lot of contacts and a lot of friends, but a lot of it were business contacts, whereas I have less contacts and less people, but the people that know who I am know me and know why they know me and know who I am and what I do.
Erik, you mentioned playing baseball at a young age, and you played every position. And then when you moved to public school, you kind of went from being the best player in the private school to kind of middle of the pack at public school. What does that teach you to how you're running the business now, from that flexibility and that constant striving?
It teaches you that there's always something to strive for. There's always going to be someone that's better. There's always going to be someone that has something that you don't. It teaches you about teamwork. It teaches you about knowing who to look for and not being afraid to not be the best, and to not being afraid to say, hey, I need help. You don't have to make the double play by yourself. You got another player that you can throw the ball to.
What's the best part of your job? As it says here, you're the founder and owner of Liberty Urgent Care. What's the best part of your job? What do you enjoy the most?
I really love everything about it. I love the medicine, but as I grow the business, I love making those relationships. I love being a boss. Sometimes, obviously, it's not so much fun, but I love that I really have grown my business to be that family atmosphere like I saw in my dad's practice. My staff is terrific. I couldn't do it without them. The townships and the communities are terrific. I couldn't do it without them. That's really my favorite part of the job is those relationships.
Mm-hmm. Do you intend to build a dynasty here, or how large or how small is this thing going to be?
Urgent cares in general are growing. I went from, I started my first one in 2016, and last year I opened 2 more. So, I have 3 now, and we'll see what the future brings. I mean, I think the plan is to keep going. Why not?
Well, you said earlier, there's always more. What is the website address of this organization known as Liberty Urgent Care?
It's libertyucc.com.
Let me have that one more time.
Sure. libertyucc.com.
We've been speaking with Erik Soiferman, who's the founder and owner of Liberty Urgent Care here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, it's executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, stick around. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break. This is Herb Cohen, your host of Executive Leaders Radio. And if you're a business consultant, if you consult to business owners or to business owners' team members, then we'd like to speak with you because we're getting requests from people all over the country, from entrepreneurs all over the country that are starting and building their businesses where they're looking for help. And maybe we can help connect you. Why don't you email us at consult@executiveleadersradio.com. That's consult@executiveleadersradio.com. And perhaps we can connect you to folks, to entrepreneurs and their team members all around the country that are looking for help. That's consult@executiveleadersradio.com. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Justin Wineburgh, President and CEO of Alkemy X. Justin, what is Alkemy X? What are you guys doing?
Alkemy X is a global media and creative content company. We make television shows, commercials, movies, advertising. If you watch it, we make it.
Mm-hmm. And where you're from originally? How many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
From Philadelphia. I have 2 younger brothers. I am the eldest.
And tell me, 8 to 14, what kind of stuff were you up to? What's the list look like?
First and foremost, I played violin and tuba. On the sports side, played hockey and lacrosse.
Mm-hmm. Caleb.
Justin, tell me about your musical career. How young were you when you started?
5 years old, my mother stuck a violin in my hand, said, "You're going to play an instrument and you're not going to quit."
What about your first performance? When was that?
That was the first real performance was in 6th grade at the Philadelphia Academy of Music.
Was it a small, it was just you and maybe 5 or 10 other people?
No, it was a full orchestra. I was performing with the Philadelphia All-City Band and Orchestra.
Okay. Well, at least if you weren't having a great day, you could probably blend in with the whole orchestra.
You can only blend in as long as you're in sync with the rest of the orchestra. If your violin bow isn't moving in the same time and same direction as everyone else, they know you're not doing your job.
So it seems like at a young age, you probably learned to be in sync, learn to be prepared. Does that have a little bit to do with the business at Alkemy X now?
Absolutely. Every single part of this company has to be in sync at the same time. We're essentially a manufacturing assembly line for creative content.
Gotcha. Jim.
Justin, how young were you when you started making money?
14, I had a job at a cousin's construction company digging holes for mailboxes.
So why were you digging post holes for mailboxes? Did someone turn you on to this?
A, because I could. It was a job that was readily available to me. And B, because I had to. More importantly, it was one that I had to do to make some money to help support the family at home.
So tell us about that. You had to help support the family. What was going on at home then at the time?
Sure. My father had left when I was 12 years old, having 2 younger brothers. I felt an obligation at that young age to do what I could to make sure that everyone was fed and everyone was clothed, and that we had basically growing up extremely poor, we had enough money to make ends meet.
So you took on a lot of responsibility at an early age, helping take care of your brothers and all that. What did that responsibility and that sense of obligation, what do you take with that to Alkemy X?
Oh, it's my complete guiding principle now of servant leadership. I'm not here to tell all of our employees what they're supposed to do. Quite frankly, they're here to tell me what we have to do and tell me what I can do to help them achieve those goals.
Mr. Matt?
You mentioned that your mom got you into music, stuck a violin in your hand. Did you love it right out of the gate?
Probably not. I suspect when I'm 5 years old, I'd far rather be playing or doing other things. But she was very clear that you can't quit. And then I foolishly, 3 years later, decided to play tuba. And she said, you can do that. You just can't quit.
So what did you learn about sticking with things, even if you don't love them at first?
We do what we have to, right? Not always what we want to do. And to be successful in business, we have to really be sure that we can focus on what we have to do and don't quit.
Sounds like you've got this thing about obligation and sticking with things in the core of your being. Am I reading that correctly?
Absolutely. I actually call it the 90% rule, that virtually all of us can do things 90% of the way. It's that final 10% that's really the hardest part of getting anything done and the most difficult task. And there's really only a small percentage of people who can actually get that final 10% done at the highest possible level.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that 8 to 14 for you was just basically a launch pad because in your prior life, for many years, you served as an attorney. Your whole nature, since your father leaving, seems to be one of serving people. As an attorney, you served folks. Nowadays, as the president and CEO of Alkemy X, you're serving. Am I reading that correctly? What am I? What's
Oh, absolutely. And you're actually skipping the age 14 to graduating law school at 25, where I was a physical server and bartender, actually physically serving people as a waiter. And then when I graduated law school, actually physically serving them as the mouthpiece that they couldn't necessarily have on their own.
Give me that again.
Sure. 14 to age 25, an actual waiter, a server, a physical server to help people, interact with people. And that's actually one of the types of people we look for here as employees, former servers and waiters.
And why?
Because similar to athletes, they know how to play on a team. And if someone can be a successful server for an extended period of time and earn tips, they have to really put up with a lot. They have to be able to interact with people. They have to be able to solve problems in real time. And it's a way of gauging someone's aptitude, their resolve, their personality, and their stick-to-itiveness.
Wow. You really value some very basic traits in people. You're not looking for somebody with some fancy degree, or you're looking for who the person is?
100%. Same thing with athletes. You play a team sport at a high level. That means you can play a team sport on the team here at Alkemy X.
Mm-hmm. Who's got the next question? Caleb?
We've heard about your musical career, and you've mentioned athletes a couple of times. Were you an athlete at all growing up?
Played lacrosse growing up, all through high school, and then played hockey growing up. Again, really up until a couple of years ago when my body doesn't recover the way it used to.
What do you learn as a hockey player? What are some of the attributes of the guys out there on the ice?
Knowing when it's time to take a break, because when the gas is starting to come out of the tank, you're not going to be the highest and best use of yourself, and you're not going to be an asset to the rest of the team.
So you learn a lot about stamina and endurance as a hockey player.
And knowing when it's time to take a break or ask for help or to take yourself out of the game for however brief of a moment.
So are you able to recognize that in others? Can you see when maybe some of your teammates might need to take a break or might need some help?
I think that's probably the most important part of my job as the CEO of the company.
Tell us a little more about that. How do you spot that? And what do you do when somebody needs a little bit of a break or a little bit of help?
I spend a lot of one-on-one time with our team here and asking questions and trying to separate sort of signaling from noise and figuring out when they need that help and how I can help them.
So I get the sense you're not the guy who hangs out in the corner office. You're kind of down there rolling up your sleeves, getting the work done as well.
All the time. out in the field. I don't need to hide in my office at all.
What do you mean by signaling versus noise?
Sure. Really listen, getting down to the root problem, right? When are people just kind of talking to vent versus what is the root cause of an issue, of a problem, of really what may be gumming up the works in our operations?
It sounds to me like, as opposed to an attorney and as opposed to running a creative organization, it sounds to me like you're a therapist at the core.
Sometimes that's what we are as running a corporation.
It sounds to me like it's really a deep understanding of people.
Most important thing, I'm in a people business. If I don't have our people here and they're not performing 100%, the company's nothing.
Mm-hmm. So you really demand from yourself. You're very demanding on yourself, sticking with stuff, really getting that extra 10% out. It's probably the reason that Alkemy X is so successful, isn't it?
I think there's a host of reasons why, but I demand excellence. And just being great at what we do is table stakes, right? Making sure that we're the best versions of ourselves and the best we can be, and really a team that works together here to create content is the special sauce.
I wish the audience could watch your body language and your hand language, as you were moving your hands together, and it looks like you were forming something. Oh, you were forming the team. What's the website address for this organization known as Alkemy X?
It's alkemy-x.com, and I'll spell it quickly because it's ALKEMY-X.com.
We've been speaking with Justin Wineburgh, President and CEO of Alkemy X, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Stick around. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break. Don't go anywhere. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. I'd like to introduce Brandon Slay, Executive Director and Head Coach, Pennsylvania RTC. Brandon, what is Pennsylvania RTC?
Pennsylvania RTC is the Pennsylvania Regional Training Center, and we are an Olympic training center for the sport of wrestling. And we train at the University of Pennsylvania and Drexel University.
And where you from originally? How many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
I was born and raised in Amarillo, Texas, which is North Texas. And I have one half sister who is 8 years younger than me.
Uh-huh. And how come you have a half sister?
My mom and dad got divorced when I was about 3. Mm-hmm. And my dad's on his third marriage now. I've had 2 different stepmoms, 2 different sets of stepsisters. Mm-hmm. So my upbringing, I definitely didn't, come from mom and dad being married and, that type of family.
Uh-huh. So who raised you?
So my dad, he knew that I needed a mother figure. So he moved in with my grandmother. Mm-hmm. So I lived with my grandmother from when I was 5 till I was 13, really important years. Mm-hmm. And so my grandmother, I call her Meemaw, and mm-hmm. I'm a big time Meemaw's boy for sure.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Matt, why don't you give me a hand?
Sure. Yeah. So wrestling, certainly not an easy sport, having to cut weight. It's a physical sport. First of all, how'd you get into it? And did you love it right out of the gate? Was it something that you just latched onto right away?
My dad, he wrestled in high school and wrestled in college at the University of Alabama. And I think when I got to be about 6 years old, he just hoped that, his boy would like wrestling too. So he took me to the local YMCA boys club in Amarillo. And it definitely was not success from the start. I was 0-20 my first year. I got pummeled, majority of those times, but I made some friends. And I would always tell people that friendships when you're a young athlete are really, really important to stick with the sport. So those friendships kept me going. In that second year, I finally won some matches. I think I won 7 matches and lost 15. But when you get your hand raised and you finally experience what it's like to be a winner, it's pretty special.
But there's a certain part of you inside of you, you got the friends, but there's a certain part of you that's got to have that perseverance factor and that ability to stick through things. What did you learn from that experience about perseverance, and how have you applied that at later stages in your life?
I think the biggest thing I've learned about that perseverance is, so I started as I said, 0-20. And then 19 years later, I was able to win Olympic gold medal. So the point is like the understanding of how important time and commitment is to anything in life, whether it's a sport, whether it's a business, whether it's a friendship, a marriage, a relationship, that time and commitment and just continued perseverance is extremely valuable.
Mm-hmm. You've ultimately ended up becoming a coach. Did you have a coach when you were younger that had an influence on you and you said, hey, I want to replicate for somebody else what that coach did for me?
I had some amazing coaches growing up, but I never told anybody that I was going to be a coach. That was never part of the plan. I went to Penn. I got accepted to the Wharton School of Business. I graduated with a degree in finance and entrepreneurial management. I worked in commercial real estate for 5 years in downtown Dallas, but I missed Olympism. Mm-hmm. I missed sports. Mm-hmm. I missed the ability to just influence people's lives. So I switched to coaching.
Jim?
Brendan, you said you spent a lot of your early formative years with your grandmother, who you affectionately call Mima. What are some fond memories you have with Mima?
My grandmother, she was always there for me, drove me to school in the morning. I mean, she was there to pick me up in the afternoon. She made sure I was all of our wrestling practice, football practice. And so I think just the always being there, presence, consistency, and unconditional love.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of life lessons did you learn from her always being there that you take with you today?
I would say just the unconditional love that I was not clearly her son. I was her grandson, but she sacrificed her life for me, and she didn't have to do that.
Caleb?
Brandon, I'm interested in the neighborhood growing up. How many kids were there?
There were some kids, but about 2 houses down, there was two guys, Horst and Cedric. They're 2 African-American boys, which, for me growing up in Texas, that was just really important to have friends. I would just say that, they were different, they were diverse. And I think that that's been really important for me, nowadays. When I went to school at Penn from Texas, when I got to West Philly, just growing up with that diversity was really important, and it helped me.
What made you different from the other kids, having just like some diverse friends, which, like you said, nobody else in Amarillo, Texas really has?
I think that, in my sport, even in wrestling and football and the Christian school I went to, I mean, it was pretty much just all white kids. And so again, on that street I grew up on, to have kids that were, different, that looked different was important. But the biggest lesson I realized from that is that they were all created equal. And regardless of what color your skin is, that, they're just like you, they tie their shoes just like you. They love others and care about people just like you. Important lesson.
Who's next?
So, Brandon, winning a gold medal, that has to be the most fulfilling accomplishment, right?
My dream was to always be an Olympic champion, and it was very special to do that. But it's really important for me to tell people that, winning a gold medal doesn't fulfill, all your problems. It's not like after it's over, just that everything's hunky dory the rest of your life. I mean, it's awesome. It's great. But I think you need to make sure you have the right motive. And if your motive is just to win the gold medal, just to be popular, to have fame and fortune, you have the wrong motives. And so I've realized for me that, my motives need to be my faith, my family, my friendships, and giving full effort. And if I do those things every single day, that is really what fulfills me.
I'm not sure I understand. What are you talking about?
Well, if I have a bad day and I don't come into my office here, put my Olympic gold medal around my neck and look in the mirror and go, oh man, don't forget, you're the Olympic champ. Don't forget. I mean, if I would never do that. And if I did that, all of you would think that was ridiculous. Right. So the success doesn't fulfill you, but my faith, my family, I'm married with 4 kids, my priceless friendships I've had, for 40 years of my life or more. And then again, just waking up every day, committing to full effort in all I do, husband, father, coach, human. When I do those things, faith, family, friendships, and full effort, I always just tell people I have a lot of fun. And that's way more valuable than the successes of the world, the gold medals of the world.
Mm-hmm. What are some of your core values?
So at the Pennsylvania Regional Training Center, our core values are: number 1, faith over fear. Number 2, full effort. Number 3 is to struggle well, because life's a struggle. Struggle well. And number 4 is to serve others, that realizing life is not all about me. It's about serving other people.
And those values, that's the kind of stuff that fills you up as opposed to a gold medal?
For sure. Those things I've realized are way more valuable, way more important, way more fulfilling. And then when you can share those values with your athletes, my guys that I'm training to become Olympic champions as well, when they live those values out and they impact the Penn wrestlers, the Drexel wrestlers, and all those high school wrestlers and youth wrestlers they come in contact with, I feel like that's when we're really, making a difference in the world.
You're really making a difference in the world when?
When you commit to those values of faith over fear, full effort, struggling well, and serving others. When you commit to those, live those out on a daily basis, and people look to you and go, wow, there's something different about those guys. There's something different about those wrestlers and leaders from the Pennsylvania Regional Training Center. When they can see that in us, we just hope that impacts them in a positive way, and they continue to do that, in their schools, their communities, their homes. I feel like that's why we can be a shining light.
Is your grandmom still around?
Unfortunately, we lost my grandmother. She passed away, but I'm still, she's still always in my heart, and I think about her every single day.
Yeah. You think she's proud of you?
I believe that she is. She was with me from the beginning when I was 8 years old, and I said I wanted to be Olympic champion. And 16 years later in Sydney, Australia, she was in the stands waving her American flag, cheering for me. So she got to be part of that whole entire journey, which was priceless.
Mm-hmm. Website address for Pennsylvania RTC.
Our website is pennsylvaniartc.org.
Give me that one more time.
pennsylvaniartc.org.
Interesting. We've been speaking with Brandon Slay, who's Executive Director and Head Coach, Pennsylvania RTC, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com. That's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. Back in a moment, right after this quick break. This is Herb Cohen, your host at executiveleadersradio.com. Regarding your career, if you're trying to figure out how to make the most money and also enjoy your career, enjoy your career, really enjoy your career and make the most money, you ought to talk to our CEOs. They've got the bird's eye view of where the really profitable jobs are, where the really profitable jobs are going to be, and they're willing to speak with you regarding their vision for the future and where you may fit into it in order to make the most money and really enjoy your career. Email us, consult@executiveleadersradio.com. That's consult@executiveleadersradio.com to get help from our CEOs regarding where you may want to go in your career to make the most money and really enjoy your career. Consult@executiveleadersradio.com. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Danny Liberatoscioli, president of Walnut Hill College. Danny, what is Walnut Hill College?
Walnut Hill College is America's first private college to focus specifically on fine dining and luxury hospitality careers.
Where you're from originally, how many brothers, sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
Born in Philadelphia, raised in the immediate suburbs. I'm the second of 4 boys.
And 8 to 14, what's the list look like of stuff you were up to?
Admittedly shy kid, but interested in geography, one of my favorite subjects at high school, active in the stage crew, and finding my way socially.
Let's see. Matt, why don't you give me a hand?
So you're shy as in that 8 to 14 range. Did that remain throughout high school and later stages of your life, or did you kind of open up at any point?
I very much opened up, and I think it really was high school and being in that setting at around freshman year, I decided to completely change and really catch up, if you will, after all those years of being quiet.
And can you point to anything in particular that kind of facilitated that change?
You know, I think I realized after, in high school, the schools were larger, the students were from a wider geographic area. And I said, this is actually not only okay, it's fun.
And who would you consider to be a bigger influence in your life, your mother or your father?
Frankly, I guess I want to say 50-50, but I'll do it this way. 51% my mom, but 49% my father.
And why is that?
Well, being an Italian-American family, obviously food and family meals and dinners and et cetera, my mother was at the center of that. My father, a bricklayer, every Sunday there was a ritual, and we together, him and I, because my brothers were outside playing with their friends and riding their bikes, the shy kid went with my father, the bricklayer, and we spent quite a lot of time at the farmer's market, passing fruit back and forth, trying to smell it if it was fresh, ending up at the local bakery, in the kitchen with the baker, eating rolls almost right out of the oven, selecting the dessert. It fascinated me that somebody that was from a different world, a bricklayer, was so intrigued with food and more so with the family experience.
And probably got you going down that path of that hospitality and great food sources and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. My father always announced the Sunday breakfast as we started to eat. No one is having such a fine breakfast. No one in the world.
Jim?
Yeah. So, Danny, were there other role models besides your mom and dad?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the extension of the Italian-American family, I would say my first primary role model chef was my grandmother, who would come to our house in the suburbs and prepare enough gnocchi for 20 people, even though we were 6. And fascinated to watch her make her own bread and place them on cookie sheets. And then to allow the bread to rise and proof, she would place it under the blankets on the beds. I was intrigued.
What is that special attention and that care that you saw your grandmother putting into that? What does that have to do with, running Walnut Hill College?
Yeah, you know what? To me, it was a very obvious expression of love and connection to people that matter to you. So when you can share the food and share those moments at the table, it was really very touching.
Mm-hmm. Caleb.
Danny, how young were you when you started making money?
I was about 15 years old, and I was a custodian at a donut shop.
A custodian at a donut shop. So most 15-year-olds are probably sleeping in the broom closet. What type of role did you have as the custodian out there?
Well, that's a good question. You're right. Most of my friends were probably home sleeping or, whatever. I was thrilled to be there. I showed up early. I worked at earnest, cleaned as much as possible. And it was fascinating to be around other folks, whether they were the staff I was working with, the manager, but even the customers.
Why is it important to have a nice, clean donut shop for the customers?
Yeah. Well, I do now know, very much know, and we teach our students at Walnut College that customers can understand those kinds of gestures very quickly. Whether a customer understands the complexity of a certain dish, a recipe, or a wine, very much everybody can understand and see if the place is being taken care of carefully. And that's an expression of the level of commitment, I believe, to hospitality.
So you learned at an early age that it's really about customer perceptions, exceeding guest expectations. Tell us a little more about how you impart that on your students at Walnut Hill College.
Absolutely. Think about it. Average college student, and all those colleges are wonderful. There's 5,300 higher education institutions. We try and do some things that are a bit different to exceed. For example, all of our students participate in foreign travel. Our culinary and pastry students go to France for a week of gastronomy. Our management students go to Florida, Central Florida, visit Disney World, but also take a cruise to the Bahamas. And then at the baccalaureate level, at the next section, they have their second travel experience, which is to England. And the theme of that trip is hospitality in action.
So they're really gaining a lot of real world, worldwide perspective at Walnut Hill College. You had mentioned that you were a little shy as a younger kid. What do you do to help students find their way socially?
Well, the student life experience here is very dynamic and very much alive. There are 23 student organizations. We require our students to earn what we call student life and learning points. Pretty simple. That means they have to be active and involved. There is on an average about 20 additional activities per week. And these are outside of the normal scheduled classes.
You mentioned that when you were a kid, you were involved with stage crew. What stage crew have to do with being the president of Walnut Hill College?
Well, stage crew is certainly the background, no doubt. But I did see, even through occasional mistake or two, that what goes on in the background is very important at the foreground. And boy, here's an example. We did Little Abner. There was a very large tree backdrop. It was probably 16, 18 feet high. And during the middle of the performance, it fell. Very slowly, it fell. I think the people in the first few rooms had a gust of wind. And we ran and we saved the moment. The show must go on.
Mm-hmm. So you're the president of Walnut Hill College. How long have you been the president? How much longer are you planning to be the president of Walnut Hill College?
I've been this is the beginning of my 41st year. And it's the beginning of my next 41 as well. I have not been to work in 40 years.
What are you talking about? Wait a minute. You've been the president for 41 years and you haven't been to work in 40 years? What are you talking about?
Absolutely. And it's what I wish for all of my graduates, because obviously when you do what you love, I'm never at work.
What is it you love doing for work that doesn't feel like work? What is that?
Well, it's a joy to actually be part of somebody's life at the education level. For me, one of the most inspirational quotes I ever read, and I use it all the time with my colleagues and so on, is Krista McCullough, the teacher that turned astronaut. And she says, "I touch the future, I teach."
Wow. Do you ever stay in touch with them? I mean, after your students graduate, do you ever bother talking to them ever again?
Absolutely. We've got such a stellar list of graduates. They're everywhere. Restaurants, hotels, catering businesses, pastry shops, all throughout the Philadelphia region, but also all over the country and even a few internationally.
Do you think your family, mom, dad, your grandparents, do you think they'd be surprised, cousins, if they found out what you're doing nowadays?
Yes. Well, luckily, my parents have passed away, but luckily they were there 40 years ago when I started in this role, and they were extremely proud, which was very meaningful to me as well.
Well, why were they proud of what? Why?
I think maybe to some degree, I'm going to say that they didn't expect it. The son of a bricklayer is now in the fancy food business and world, if you will, and then ends up teaching and inspiring future great chefs, hoteliers, pastry chefs.
So you really love your job. And it sounds to me like my bet is that the staff, you have long-term staff members and teammates. What's the website address of this Walnut Hill College?
It's walnuthillcollege.edu for education.
Walnut Hill College. We've been speaking with Danny Liberatoscioli, president of Walnut Hill College, here on Executive Leaders Radio. And Jim, could you please give us a rundown on who we've had on the air today?
Sure. We had Erik Soiferman, founder and owner, Liberty Urgent Care. We had Justin Wineburgh, president and CEO, Alkemy X. We also had Brendan Slay, executive director and head coach, Pennsylvania RTC. And finally, Danny Liberatoscioli, president, Walnut Hill College.
Well, I'd like to thank my co-host, Jim Wilson from Newmark, Caleb Hoppus, Hanlon, and Matt Clark, Corcentric, for giving me a hand structure in the questions, hopefully providing our listening audience an educational and entertaining show. I'd like to thank our listening audience for listening. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a radio show. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com. That's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. Thank you for joining us today, and please have a nice day. Bye-bye.